All right, I thought I'd try a different style of video. I've had this Bosch Jigsaw for a long time. I love it. It does everything I need it to. I even did a video about it a while ago. I'll leave a link below if you want to check that out. But lately I've been getting sent on location a lot, and I've been thinking a cordless Jigsaw would make a lot of sense for me. So I decided to go with the Porta cable. I've had good luck with some of the other cordless tools. But I thought it'd be interesting to compare the two saws, because some of you out there might be debating, you know, corded, cordless, which is the way to go. So let's try it out, cutting a few different materials. We're going to cut some shapes on some 3/4 inch ply. We'll cut through a 4x4, and then maybe at the end we'll try something that'll push the limits of both saws. Okay, so one good thing is that they're both the T-shank style blades, so it's always an easy blade change. To keep things on an even playing field, I'm going to use the same blade in both saws. So let's watch how we put this in. It looks like a very nice quick release mechanism, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock it so I don't accidentally turn it on when I'm installing the blade. Pull this back. And that feels like it's in there good. Okay, let's go ahead and make a cut with the Porta cable. So I intentionally chose sort of some tight radiuses to see how well the saw would do as it's making those tight turns. I could feel it bog down. I had to, you might notice in the video, I'm sort of bracing the wood. Even though I have it clamped down, I'm having to brace it because I'm really pushing the saw through the cut. It did keep pace though, but I'm just wondering maybe it's not good for super tight radiuses. Another thing I want to check real quick is this battery was fully charged before I did that cut. Let's check on the battery indicator, see if we notice it come down. So I'm still rating as fully charged, so that didn't drain the battery too bad. We'll keep checking after each cut so you can get an idea of battery life. But now that we've made the cut with that, I'm going to take that blade out, put it in the Bosch, and do the exact same cut. All right, so that was a much smoother action with the Bosch. Now, one thing with these saws, you can control how fast the blade goes. On the Bosch, it's a setting on the back, so it's very stable. It's the same speed no matter how hard you squeeze the trigger. However, on the Porta cable cordless, the more you pull on the trigger, the faster it goes. So it's a little more difficult to keep that consistent speed if you're not going for the absolute fastest. You'll notice when I was cutting with the Bosch, I didn't have to brace the board with my hand as much. It did slow down in the corners, but it didn't feel like it bogged down power-wise. It's more the fact that it's probably too wide a blade to make that tight turn. I made it tighter turns to kind of try to push the saws to check the performance. So really, this made a cleaner cut, but I felt like with not much work, not much extra work, that this did pretty well. The one thing that disappointed me with the cordless Porta cable is the marring that it left on the board. That's the finish actually sort of rubbing off of the metal base plate. You'll notice the Bosch has a plastic base plate to prevent that. That's removable for when you set the blade at an angle. This is telling me one of two things. Either I need to make my own plastic base plate or see if they have an aftermarket one, or also I can also put something called transfer tape on it, which is a very low adhesive tape before I make my cut, and that'll prevent any marring. But to take that extra step, that's something I'm going to have to deal with as I use this on the field. Let's see how these two saws do cutting through thicker material like this 4x4. I'll get a little bit of a longer blade on it. I've set it so it will rake more as it cuts through, and again, I'll be controlling the speed by how much I pull on the trigger. All right, so I had to help that along a little bit. It actually, it bogged down so much from me pushing, the board went down in the vise. I had to tighten my vise a little bit more, and I had it pretty tight before. So I am having to push along and sort of wiggle it, which tells me the sort of raking action that I've set it to max out on isn't happening enough, and it's causing the blade to bog down. So let's take the same blade out, put it in the Bosch, and try the same cut. All right, I almost forgot, let's check the battery after that cut. So that cut brought it down to 2. I felt like that cut really pushed what this saw can do. All right, same cut with the Bosch, but I've maxed out the stroke just like I did on the other end. The speed is set the same. All right, so I didn't have to push extra hard on that. That cut really nicely, and I could feel it stroking through as it made the cut. So let's move on and let's try something else. All right, so we're going to do something next that's meant to push the limits of the saw to really see how it's performing. I wanted to do it with a fresh charged battery for the Jigsaw. I want to know if it's the saw's performance, not the drain battery, that's bogging down the cut. So just for a quick reference, with after making 2 cuts, essentially one small cut in 3/4 plywood and another cut in a 4x4, we brought this battery down to 2 bars. And so as a reference point, you know, if I'm working with my impact driver all day, putting in screws, things like that, it would take me probably about 4 hours to get that thing down to 4 bars. And that happened with just 2 cuts. So you can see it's a much bigger draw on the battery. You're gonna wanna make sure you always have a freshly charged battery waiting. But with that in mind, let's put in a new battery. We've got 3 bars here. And what I've done here is I've installed a metal cutting blade into the Jigsaw, and we'll see if it can cut through this 1.5 inch box tube. All right, so that was able to make the cut. You might see that it would jump at certain points. Essentially, my miscalculation, the blade length is kind of similar to the length of the actual tube steel. So as it pierces through the wall and hits the bottom, it made it jump a little bit. So I essentially had to cut in 4 times. And when I made the last cut, it was clear underneath and it dropped right off. It was a tough cut, you know, and I expected it to be. I had to brace the saw quite a bit. You could see my hands were vibrating, but it did make the cut. It's not a clean cut, really not even close. So you would need to finish this off with a grinder, and it's especially not a square cut. But it did do it. Let's see how much it drained the battery. All right, so remember I had a fresh battery for this. Still on 3, so that wasn't that bad a draw. Let's make the same cut with the same blade on the Bosch. Broke the blade. All right, so a little bit unexpected. I didn't get through the steel with my Bosch, and I don't know if it's a power thing or if it's just that perhaps I had the speed up too high because the blade broke and it really heated up. So I wasn't expecting to get a great cut out of either of these saws. This is not something you normally use it for. I just wanted to sort of push the limit. I felt like the motor could handle it, but it really did not perform. It didn't even get through one wall of the box tube, whereas the cordless actually did. It made a nasty cut, but it made a cut. A lot like a cut you would get from a Sawzall, but to be honest, this is probably something you use a Sawzall for anyway. So thanks for watching this experiment. I hope it was helpful. I hope it lets you decide what saw is the best saw for you. For a reference point, this Porta-Cable cordless as a bare tool with no battery, no charger, no bag, just the tool, was about $58. And this Bosch was like $168 or something. I checked the current price, it's in that ballpark. I'm thinking that this tool will be good on the road, although I will have to do something to address that issue of marring. But thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you liked it, click that button below.